If you've never had me, this is new to you, but the way that I grade my stuff is you fill out this submission form. When you turn in your assignment, you also turn in this form. I grade your assignment. I put any notes on this. I put your grade into Canvas, and then I return the form to you. Once you're satisfied with your grade, you just recycle the sheet. If you're going to fix anything, you fix your stuff, check this little box, give it back to me, and then that way I know that you're resubmitting your assignment, and then I go back and I regrade it, okay? I allow one redo or resubmit per assignment, so that way if I say you've missed these 5 things and you turn in 1, and then I say well, you're still missing these 4, you can't like re-get those 4. You just decided not to do those, okay? The first couple of these we're going to fill out together. This is recorded. I have a purple binder up here that I also house all of my stuff in, so if you don't get everything, you can always fill that out after. Otherwise, you can just fill it out, when you get a chance. So this is our bouncing ball project. This is our first go at it. The due date will be September 7th. I'm pushing the due dates for these to the weekend just because it takes longer to render some of these out. So if you need that Thursday or Friday to render your stuff out, you have it, okay? So these will be due next Saturday. Remember, Monday of this coming week, we don't have class. So we're going to be here this Wednesday, we'll be here next Wednesday, and then it's due on that Saturday, okay? Should be plenty of time to do the bouncing ball stuff. The purpose of this is to understand organic animation of a bouncing ball. We watched the 12 principles of animation. We went through and did a couple of bouncing ball exercises over the past day. Today we're going to get into the final one. Everyone's project should have at least 2 seconds of rolling, 3 main bounces, extra bounces, and 2 seconds of rolling, okay? So we're not going to do bouncing right away. You should have 2 seconds at the start, then it bounces, has some trailing bounces at the end, and then does 2 more seconds of rolling. Squash, stretch, rolling, a reason for bouncing. This could mean that your ball has some life to it, so you could actually give the ball a personality. It doesn't have to have a face or anything, but it could have a personality, meaning that it rolls up to, like, let's say the edge of a cliff, and it kind of like leans forward a little bit to decide whether it wants to jump. It leans back, and then it like does an actual like bounce into where it's going to go, okay? So that would be acceptable, give it some life. Or you could have some kind of platform. It rolls over, it hits the platform, and it flies up. Or it rolls, then flies off the edge of a cliff, and then bounces that way, okay? Nice materials, lighting, cameras, motion blur. We'll get into all this stuff. Nice, smooth animation, okay? This is our first project, obviously, but we've done this a few times on the bouncing ball. We've animated a few properties, but really try to get a nice, smooth animation that feels realistic, that feels like the ball is rolling when it's rolling. It feels like it's bouncing when it's bouncing. It feels like gravity is part of this world, okay? And obviously, a simulation of gravity and physics on the ball. So your turn-ins for this, you'll turn in a storyboard. So the stuff that we talked about before, things like this, where you have the plan of what the ball is going to do. You also have indicators showing where the ball is going to be squashy or stretchy, where it's going to be anticipating some of those things we talked about last time. I still have that on my notepad. Here, 2540, bouncing ball. Yep. So all of these different things that we might have for the bouncing ball, make sure you have those too, right? Update your sketches to include the above principles. Okay, so all of that planning stuff you'll also turn in. Now, if you have it digitally, like typically, depending on where I'm at, I might draw on my computer, so I'd have a digital file. I might draw on my sketchbook, and then I have a piece of paper. So however you want to submit it, either take a picture of your stuff, put it in the computer, and print it, or take a picture of your stuff, save it into your images folder, or if it's digital, just save it or print it or whatever and just staple it, however you want to set that up. As long as I get those somehow, okay? Oops. Your project folder, and then I only want the essentials, which is going to be the ball. So the storyboard stuff I'd want, and then the ball movie only. I don't need your Maya file, I don't need any of your images, I don't need any of your textures. Because we're only focusing in on the animation part, I only really need the animation to grade that one, okay? As far as Maya files go. The movie will be at least 6 seconds. Does anyone know where I came up with 6 seconds from? No. What was that? Nope. If we have 2 seconds of rolling at the beginning and 2 seconds of rolling at the end, there's 4 seconds. So most likely you're going to have at least 2 seconds of bouncing in the middle. Okay. So that's where I got 6 plus. You might have a longer story. The ball might go to the edge. It might rock a little bit. It might get kind of nervous, and then it bounces. Or it might just go right into it and do its bounces and be done within like 6 seconds. Okay. Typically, that's a good time frame. Resolution is 960 by 540. If you plan on using this, it turns out awesome, and you're like, I want to use this for my portfolio, and you have time, render it at a higher resolution. Okay. Your always best bet is to render it at like 1920 by 1080. That way you can go to pretty much any size you would need for your demo reel. You could always do it at this res, turn it in, get any notes, and then when you have a minute, then set it to render at a higher res, okay? Again, one of the great things about 3D, we're not constrained to that, you know, whatever we start our project at, we have to stick to. Make a 2540 and 8 points possible. Also make sure your name is on this. That way I know whose stuff this is. That always helps. I know a lot, but I can't read your file rating. Questions on the sheet? No? Awesome. All right, so I will have this in this purple binder. It'll be in the video too, so you can always jump back and catch up if you missed one of the areas or whatever. I will close all my stuff here. And then I'm going to get into the actual bouncing ball. So I'm going to show you the setup for this. Okay, so everything we've done before was really just like preparing, practicing, getting ready to understand those principles to then apply to this setup. Okay, so I'm going to go through the whole process of building my scene and then animating my bouncing ball from the very start to the very end. Okay, half of you will not listen to anything I say and you'll do it wrong, and then that's fine. You can figure it out. So I'm going to pick one of these stages here, and I'm going to go with the most likely-ish ones, okay? So most likely, people are going to do something like this, or they'll do something like that. Either way, those are kind of really simple. You could also just do a straight line. I think I have it on my previous image. If I opened it up correctly, 2540, there it is. Right, so something like this where it's just straight, and we have something there. Either that, okay? Again, it's your options. I'm just trying to give you the most likely scenario. This is something most people probably wouldn't do, is go ahead and model those kinds of bricks. That's a step that you don't really need to take. If you had the time, it could look cool if you modeled some actual like rocky type structures for something with that much detail, okay? But whatever yours is, that's what yours is. She put holes in the ground, obviously. And then she built these really simple-ish characters. There's nothing really crazy detailed about them. Now we have 2 seconds of rolling at the beginning of this, the 3 main bounces, a couple trailing bounces, and then at least 2 seconds of rolling at the end. Okay. Now anytime we do a bounce also, we need to make sure there's some kind of image or texture or something on the ball so we can see that it's actually rolling. Okay, so that was one I just thought it was, you know, she spent some time modeling those guys there. All right, so I'm going to start off with a brand new setup. So I believe, let me see. I don't think we've set anything up yet. No, okay. So I'm going to create a new project. So I'm going to go to my project window. I'm going to make a new project folder, and I'm going to give it a name, Sarcona Bouncing Ball. Every project we do should have your name on it. Every file you have should have your name on it. If you lose it, very easy to find it. That's how I was able to find Angela's stuff, because her name was attached to her files. You have no idea how many files I get where it just says finished movie or final movie, and I have no idea whose stuff it is. And I just delete it because I'm not going to guess. So Sarcona bouncing ball, I'm putting it in my 2540 folder. If you have no idea what I'm doing here, that means you didn't watch the project setting video. Make sure you watch the project setting video. So now I'm going to go and build my set. Oops, I'm going to turn my grid on so it doesn't look so weird. So I'm going to build, like I said, this set here. So I'm going to start off with a polygon plane. And I'm just going to scale this up. So I'm in the scale tool, and I'm just scaling the plane up. There we go. If I was doing just he's on the plane and he's bouncing, that's all I would need, okay? If I want more of an obstacle course for him, then I'm going to do the next step, which is actually do a little bit of modeling to this to give it that look. Now in here, we just have these kind of sharp corners, like that. So I'm going to go to my polyplane options, and I'm going to get rid of, I think, the height. Yes, it was the height. Okay, so I just want these ones going this direction. Then I'm going to right-click. This is where I can do things like edit the vertices, edit the faces, edit the edges, and I'm going to go to the vertices. And I'm just going to grab a group of vertices and then move it down. Wait, sorry, I'm doing the wrong one. I'm going to grab a group of faces. This one, actually, this one, that one, and these three. And then I'm going to hit Control E. And this is an extrude hotkey. Okay? And then I can just pull the blue arrow up, and now I've extruded. If I want to put these at different levels, I can just grab the face, hit the move tool, and move this to whatever level I think I want to put those at. Okay? Now, some things to keep in mind. If I did something like this, most likely my ball would have to have some kind of life in order to reach each one of those. Because as we talked about before, the first bounce, he's going to go a certain height. The second bounce is going to go less high, and the third bounce is going to go less high. So if he is here and he bounces and hits there, I'd have to make sure he bounces higher to hit this point. Or on this one, he bounces really high and then hits that one and then hits that one. Okay? So I think I'm actually going to do a progressive. It goes down like this. There we go. It's a little bit higher there. That's good. And now I need an area here for him to just like bounce on. I don't have another plane, so I'm going to go to Edge. I'm going to extrude the edge, switch to the Move tool, and just pull it out. Then I can grab this face, extrude that face, and pull it up. Okay? All the extrude tools that I'm using are just under Edit Mesh. Extrude is right there. Okay? You can extrude edges, you can extrude faces. I'm also going to go to Edge and double-click all the way around. Extrude this, go to the Move tool, and then push it down. Okay, so that just gives me a really good starting point or a really good area for him to be bouncing on. Bump, bump, bump. And then he has plenty of time to roll right here. And I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to go to Edges. I'm going to grab every single edge in this thing. And I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, and I'm going to go to Bevel. And Maya pops open this box. I'm going to type in 0.1 and do 2 segments. When we talk about things like the appearance and solid drawing and the way it looks, this bevel adds a nice little edge to this so it doesn't feel too rigid. It feels more complete. Okay? Everything should have some sort of bevel to it. So there's my platform. So I'm going to hit Control S. Maya will automatically drop this into my scenes folder, and I will say Sarcona _ bouncing ball startup. Or 01, or whatever you want to call it. Then I'm going to create my sphere, and then move him to where he starts. Now I'm actually going to move my ground here to where that starts. Okay, so I want the ball to start on the ground, but I don't want to have to move everything. I want to just move this. Yeah, let's make that bigger. that seems like an appropriate size for that. And let's make sure this is sitting on the ground. Let's freeze transform. And then I'm just going to switch to my front view and move this up. There we go. And switch back to my perspective. Okay. So now this is set up. So the goal of this is that he's going to roll across here, and then at some point he'll kind of jump or something. And then he will bounce here, bounce there, bounce there, bounce there, bounce a couple more times, and then he'll roll right to the edge and stop right there. Okay. So that's the goal. So I'm going to take him first, and I'm going to switch to my side view. So I'm holding spacebar, clicking on that Maya button, and going to front view, not side view. There we go. All right. So you're going to be tempted to just start animating. Just hit S, start animating, throw a bunch of keys in there, and let it go. Don't do that. Focus on one attribute at a time. Your life will be a lot easier that way. Okay? So I'm going to focus on just the bouncing first, and then I'll get into the positioning, then I'll get into rolling, and then I'll get into the other stuff. Okay? So this is what we did last time, was translate Y. So I'm going to start off at frame 1. My hotkey still works, so I can click on the translate Y and hit S, and it just sets it there. Remember, we don't want hotkeys or keyframes on everything. We only want it on that one attribute at a time. Now, I don't know how far up I need to go. I'm going to go to, let's say, 30, and I'm going to set another key. I'm going to go to 60, set another key. I'm going to go to 90, set another key. I'm going to go to 120, set another key. Make this bigger. Okay? Then I'm going to go back to 15 and raise it up. I'm going to go back to 45 and set a key. Go back to 75, set a key. Now, do you remember what I'm doing so that my time does not advance as I'm clicking and dragging? What was that? I'm just middle mouse buttoning. Okay, so I can go through and set all my bottom poses, set one of my top poses, and then just middle click and then set a key. Middle click, set a key. You're free to go to frame 1 and set it at here, go to frame 15, set it there, go to 30, set it there, 45, and so on. But I prefer doing it the way I did it. Now, I'm going to also set another key every time it hits the ground. Sometimes what could happen with motion blur is the ball is here, the ball is on the ground, and then the ball is here. Sometimes with motion blur, we miss this bottom frame. So the ball comes down and it actually like just skips over and comes up. It's kind of weird, but that's just how it works. So I'm going to go to where it's on the ground here at 1. And I'm just going to go up 1 frame with my middle mouse. There we go. And set a key. I'm going to go to 31, set a key. I'm going to go to 61, set a key. Go to 91, set a key. And 121 and set a key. Okay? That way I have 2 keyframes right at the bottom so that my ball will for sure have 2 frames of it being on the ground. Okay? Because I want to make sure that whenever it's sitting there, it feels like it's on the ground. I want that impact to happen. So I set those extra keys. That's the only thing different so far I've done from last time. So now I'm going to jump into which one of these tools here? Graph Editor, right? That's the only one we've talked about so far. So what do I need to change first on this?
The height.
What about them?
Make them different.
Different?
Like lower when you get to the end.
Yep. Okay. What else?
And pull out the tangents a little more to make them.
We have to do one more thing before we do that. Yep, set it to linear, right? So right now the ball's like floating, right? So we'll grab all the bottom ones, set it to linear. And then we're going to do that thing with the curves, weighted tangents, free tangent weight. And then we can control these. So I'm just going to adjust this. Adjust that. Oops. I have 2 keyframes there, so I just have to be careful. I only grab the one. There we go. hold that open a little bit. And then the same thing on this side. Grab this one. Now we also need to make sure whatever this hill looks like, that hill looks the same, right? So all of these need to shift down. Because just like the heights are getting less, the space between is getting less. And depending on what kind of ball this is, would dictate how far apart and how low they go. If we're dealing with, let's say, a bowling ball, that first hill might be like, 5 feet off the ground, and then the second hill might be a foot off the ground or a half a foot off the ground, okay? If it's a bouncy ball, the first one might be 5 feet, and then 4.5, and then 4, and then so on, okay? So you really have to kind of like look at that as you're doing your stuff. Yes. Okay. Oops. All right, so that should be good enough. Let's see. So we'll rewind this. We'll play. All right, I need a little bit more oomph on the swing down here. So I'm just going to punch these a little bit closer together. So 15 frames is way too slow for that to be bouncing in the first place. That might be something like, those balls that they would have in the ball rack at Toys R Us. That's what that was. And let's click this. Let's click this. I'm also going to grab these in-between ones. It's hard to see, but as I'm adjusting those handles, you can see how they're like swooping under. So I'm going to grab these and just hit linear there. It really wouldn't cause any issues unless we stretch things out. So I just want to be cautious with it is all. Just grabbing those, linear. And linear, okay. So let's rewind this. I really need to exaggerate this more. There we go. That should be up like this. There we go. So as I squished those together, I did not adjust these handlebars. I just need to tweak those a bit more. Because remember, part of our animation isn't just about going through and setting keyframes and saying this is something that's animating. It's about making it fun for people to look at. There we go. All right, so that's good for the first initial bounces. Cool. All right, I can still tweak that a bit more, but I think that's good. All right, so my initial bouncing is done. Okay. All right. So now that the bouncing is done, now I'm going to do my rolling. Okay. Now for my rolling, how many seconds do we have at the beginning of this? 2. And how many frames per second are we doing? It's on here. I did not specify. But in here, we have it set to 24. Okay. So we're going to just stick to 24 because Maya uses that as the default. All right, so it's easier for us to do. So 24 times 2 is what? 48. So we're going to use a different tool, which is called the dope sheet. And the dope sheet allows us to take a collection of keyframes and adjust their time, not their values. Okay, the graph editor does both. I can move them up and down to adjust values, or I can move them left and right to adjust the time. The dope sheet is only adjusting the time on this. So all of these are the keyframes that I have. This is at frame 1. I'm going to scoot my ticker over here to frame 48. Make sure I'm in the move tool and just middle drag. And that allows me to scoot all of my keyframes over to frame 48. Okay? So that should give me roughly 2 seconds of time to have rolling, and then my bounces, and then I'll have another 2 seconds of rolling. Okay? So I'm going to start this off here. And I'm going to go to my translate X now, whichever one goes that way. I'm going to go to right there. That's where it's going to start. And I'm going to set a keyframe right about there. Okay. Then I'm going to go to where it hits the ground. And then I'm going to move it here. Now notice I'm also going to have to adjust the Y position of this. It's going to have to go down, otherwise it's not going to work. So I will adjust that after. Right now I'm just focused on the one value. I'm going to go to here, put this roughly in the center, go here, put that roughly in the center, go there, put that roughly on the edge, and then go to, what's 117 plus 48? 165, it's close. So let's go to like 200. There we go. Should be plenty of time for that. All right. So make sure we had enough room there. So now if we look at this, we can go, here it goes. Okay, and then it goes super slow there. We'll have to adjust that. Okay, so what I'm looking at now is just does the animation as far as the transition from moving across to bouncing, does that feel right? That's what I'm looking at. So that feels like a good speed on the start, okay? There's no like slowing down, there's no speeding up. Right when we get to the end, you can definitely see a transition of the speed of the ball going into that slow motion. Now, should I adjust anything on that Translate X? There's the Translate X. Do you think it needs any adjustment? Sort of, right? So I could sort of smooth this out, but I have to be careful because if I start adjusting some of these properties, it might shift the ball one way or the other, okay? But we do want to make sure it is nice and flowing from one to the other. So like this is pretty good, but when we get here, we can definitely see there's a little hiccup. So I'm just going to do something like that. I may have to adjust that further, but we'll see. All right, that's all right. We'll adjust it further. All right. I'm going to go to the graph editor, and I'm going to edit my Translate Ys. Again, if I was on your station working on this, I would have one screen as my graph editor, one screen as my Maya file, so I don't have to do what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go here to where we are hitting the first platform, and these keyframes need to just scoot straight down. So I'm going to hold Shift and middle drag down until it hits in the right spot. If you did just a straight platform where there's no obstacles like this, you don't have to worry about going up and down because it doesn't. Then I'm going to go here and do the same thing. And you want to get close to this so that you make sure that it does hit it. Oops. You're so close, just get up a little bit more. And I really have to zoom in apparently to get this to work. There we go. And then we'll go to the next one. Go, and then we'll go to the last one. All right. Now it might seem like I'm being finicky, like zooming in this close, but if it's not touching the ground, we will definitely notice it, not when we're working, but when we render it out. So we'll go through the whole process, render it, look at it, and the ball's here and the shadow is obviously underneath it, okay? All right, so we've adjusted it. We may have to adjust the Y graph a little bit more, but let's just take a look and see. It goes here. It doesn't look too bad. Probably adjust it slightly. There we go. Now I do have to do something else. Let me see if you notice it. What looks weird?
It jumps up.
Where? It is. It's going the same height, right, as before? Or is it? It's right there. Yeah, it should go definitely lower because it's still going too high there. The other thing, let me zoom in so we can see when it lands. Where are you at? Right there. Here's it coming in. So here's where it should be on the ground. See how it's sliding? So same thing that I did before, I need to do to the Y direction, or to the X direction. So when it hits that platform, I need to scoot up with the middle mouse one frame and set a key on it. Same thing here. Go to this frame, middle click on the next frame, set a key. Go to there, middle click the next frame, set a key. Go to there. This one should be fine, but I'll middle click anyway and set a key. All right, back to the graph editor. Let me fix the stuff you said to fix. So these should be coming down a lot lower, right? Maybe not that low on that one. All right, so let's take a look at that and see. What went wrong there? Let's look at our Translate X. Okay, so what's it doing wrong? Yep, so it's stopping, and then it's easing back into it, right? So we had this nice smooth graph going from one to the other, but now it's like ease in, ease out, ease in, ease out. So we're getting this weird motion. So in these ones, we can just set this to this. Which one is that? Clamped? Spline. So this one's spline, this is auto, this one's clamped. Yeah, we don't want clamped, we want spline. And this will give us a nice smooth transition from one to the other of the same speed. And then when we get to ones like this, we just have to linear that. So it continues. All right, so that should be good. So let's take a look at this again and see. All right, there's some speed issues there. I go back and I would adjust those positions. Move them closer, move them further apart. So let's go to the dope sheet. And I'm going to look for what works. Okay, so it looks like we're actually picking up speed as we go. So there, and we're going faster and faster and faster, right? So those need to get further apart. So if I look where this one is, that's right here. That's those two keyframes as it landing on the platform. This is the next bounce. So this distance has to get more. This distance has to get more. And then I'm going to take this one and make it more. And I'm going to take that one and make it more. This one and make it a little bit more. This one take it a little bit more. Okay. Slow that one down a little bit more there. All right, good enough for now. I can, again, always go back and tweak those. And this is why you really want to focus on one at a time. If I went through and I started rotating, positioning, and scaling all of these, it would just be too much. Too much stuff going on. Okay, so I'm going to pretend that this is all set. Again, I'd probably spend another 20 minutes or so just tweaking it just to make sure that that feels better. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my rolling. So the first thing I do is figure out which direction it's going to roll. So which direction is it going to roll? This one? No. This one? Yeah. So that's the right one. Now this will upset you if you're at all like me. We are rolling to the right, but this is going to go into a negative number. Okay? I wish it was positive. There's nothing we can do about it because if we've already built our scene, I do it every time. So it's just this one, just rotate Z. So I'm going to start it off at 1. And then what I'm going to do is go to the end of this hill here, and I'm going to rotate it around a couple times, and then set a key. So let's see if that looks like it's rolling. There we go. So that looked pretty good. Now it's going to be hard to tell unless we zoom in and kind of watch it. Okay? So what I do is I watch the grid on the sphere, I watch the grid in the background, and as it rolls, I'm looking to see if those make sense. And it looks like for the most part it does. I think when we get to the middle it might look a little slippery, but we'll see. No, that still looks pretty good. I mean, it's probably a little bit slippery, but we're not going to notice that. Let me show you what it would look like if I did this bad. So that's where my keyframe is. I'm going to spin it around a bunch more times. It's way too much. Okay. So look how much the ball is spinning, and it hasn't even moved. Okay. So that ball shouldn't be spinning that much. We should feel like as the ball is spinning, it's moving forward at the same speed. Okay? Now, we only have one stipulation as far as how much it rolls, which is when it gets to the end of this, I need it facing that direction. Okay? Because when I do my squashing and stretching, I need to make sure that the poles of it, the centers of it, are going the direction that it's going to be bouncing. Okay? And you'll see why when we get to it. So that's good there. I'm going to go to my next one, which is here, and I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. So like that. And then I'm going to set a key. I'm going to go up with my middle mouse 1 frame, set another key. Then I'm going to go up to this one, rotate it another 180, which this would just be negative 1080 at this point. Middle mouse button the next frame, set a key. Go to the next one. It's late in the day. 1080 plus 180, 1260. Negative 1260. Go to the next frame, set a key there. Go to this one. Go to the next frame, set a key, and then go to the very end and do the same thing we did at the beginning, which is kind of like that. Okay? This one doesn't matter at the very end of how it ends up, okay, unless you have some specific rationale for why you want it to end up a certain way. All right, cool. So let's see how this looks. Rolling good. All right, so sufficient for where we're at with this. Again, I'd probably go through the graph editor, look at that rotate Z, and just verify that nothing looks out of place. This seems the way that it should, okay? We're going to get, because it's rolling and then squashing and stretching, it is going to have some slows and speeds up in there, okay? This is simple enough. If we did make a mistake, we can come back and edit just that one graph. But these are in the right spot, which is the important part. Okay. So now I'm going to do my squashing and stretching. So right here, I'm going to do a little bit of finagling here because I want my keyframe there for rotation. Yes, there. I'm going to go to this frame, and I'm going to rotate that like this. There we go. I may have to adjust that. I don't think I like it going straight up. I don't know why it's doing that. All right. So I'm going to go here. This is where it's going to squash down. So when I squash, I'm going to be scaling it like this. But I'm also going to jump to perspective so you can see this, that I also have to scale it out. That's what we saw in the video. You can't just grab one direction and scale it this way. You have to do both. This goes down, these go out. Okay? If we look at the scale values, they're all 1 right now. If I scale this one below 1, what are the other two going to do? Scale above 1, right? Now, when it stretches, it's going to go the opposite. So then these two are going to go in below 1. So then the other one's going to go above 1, right? Now, we just have to keep in mind the look of it. There's no exact formula that we can use or we are going to use that will tell us exactly how far to go either way. We just have to know that this seems ridiculous, okay? So we're going to give it a little bit of scale here, a little bit of scale here, a little bit of scale there. Now, as I scale it, let me jump back to my front view. You'll see what happens to the Translate Y. It comes off the ground. So eventually I'll have to go back and set that Translate Y and fix that. For now, I'm just going to focus on just those scales. So I'm going to set the scale here. Okay. Now watch what happens if I go before this. Yes. So I have to go literally the frame before this, reset all these back to 1, and then set a key. Your scales will be very lots of keyframes, and they'll be like one right after another, because the transitions are going to be so drastic. Okay. So this is going to be 0, and then it squashes right here, and then right about there, it'll probably stretch out. So I'm going to grab these two here. Oh, come on. All right, it wants me to do it in perspective. Grab this thing, squish that in, and then set my key. Okay? So now let's watch it. It rolls in, squashes down, and then scales up. Okay? Now, if this ball was rotated a different direction, like this, we would have issues getting the scale to work correctly. Okay? So that's why we needed to make sure that when it hit, it was facing a certain direction. Now, when it goes like this, like that, where is the ball going to be back to being round? Yep, at the highest point. So right up here, we just grab these and reset these to 1. Now, will that be the case every time it's at its highest point? Yes. Okay, so let's cheat and let's go to the highest points and just reset these in. I don't like to do extra work. That's the way to do it. What about way over here at the end? We'll be back to 1s here. Yes. Okay, so there. So now those points are all set. Okay, so when will it be stretched out all the way again? Where?
Right after its highest point.
Right here? You tell me when to stop.
Probably about there.
Right here?
Yeah, maybe a little bit, a frame or two before.
What's causing it to stretch out?
Kind of like that falling, right?
Velocity, right? Gravity. As it falls, it's going to stretch out more, right? So by using that definition, the more it falls, the longer it's going to be, right? So where's the longest point? Right before it hits. So right there, okay? That's right before it hits the floor. That should be its longest point. So let's do this again. So let's stretch this out. Let's squish that in, and let's set a keyframe right there. Now what's it going to do right here? Squash, right? So I'm making sure that I go above 1 here on the X and Z, and then below 1 on the Y. Okay. The next frame, because it's still sitting on the ground, that should be the same. All right, so then when's the next stretchy point? The very next frame. Yep. Back to here. Back to there. All right, so let's take a look at that first bounce. Right, so that feels bouncy. We still got to fix that X position. Like it needs to move faster in the X direction right there. Let's go to the graph editor. I would typically do this after, but it's just going to bother me while we're lecturing about it. That be a little bit quicker there. Let's try that and see. Yeah, that feels better. There we go. Okay. So now this process is going to be just duplicated, right? So we go here, boom, And actually the rotate too. Let me fix that rotate. Rotate Z. Let me flatten all of these out. Not you. You are not flat. You go straight. I'm going to adjust these a little bit more like that maybe, and like this. There we go. Let's just see what that looks like there. Yeah, I'll adjust it some more. It just still looks kind of weird. Let me just undo those. All right. So now we're going to have the same thing. So there it's stretched out. There it's round again. Right before it hits, we're back to being stretched out. Right here, we're back to being flat. Still flat. Next keyframe, we're leaving the ground. Okay, back to being round again. Back to being stretched out again. Oops. Now notice how I'm not being too concerned with any of the values. I'm just grabbing it and putting some keyframes down. All of my values for this, I do after the fact. So I'm scaling this above, squishing this in. There we go. All right, so now let's look at the ball bouncing and squishing and squashing. I should probably save this, right? Okay, so that definitely needs some adjustment. I think I just need to reset that X back to where it was. Set that back there. It's all messed up. Let's fix the rotate also. See how annoying it is to have to keep opening that up again, over and over again. There we go. So I just made all the rotates just linear. I can probably take this first one and make it flat. Take this one and make it flat. Translate X, I did the same thing. So all of these are just that spline, and the start of this will be flat, and the end of this will be flat. Should be good. All right, so it's sufficient for now. Sufficient. All right, so let's go and look at the graph editor, and let's look at our scale X, Y, and Z. Okay, the most confusing graph that we are going to have in this whole project, but if you understand what's happening, then it's not so bad. Okay, so which two of these are going to be the exact same? Which one? Oops, double click that. Say Y and Z. X and Z. Okay. So X and Z, whenever one moves in, the other one's going to move in too. Whenever one moves out, the other one's going to move out. Okay? And then what's Y doing when X and Z move in? What does Y do? Out, right? So it's opposite. X and Z are going to be opposite of Y. So if you look at the Y graph, you'll see that here's the X and Z, it's way up here, and there's the Y. Here's the X and Z right here down there, and here's the Y. Okay, the Y is green. X and Z, it's only showing the blue, but they're both there. I think if I select them in the other order, no, it still won't do it. Yeah, it's always going to be that one. So as long as we know that X and Z are together, we know to marquee it, we should be good. And as long as we know that Y should be always the opposite of these, we should be good. Okay. Now I don't see, usually I would see a thing there. I don't know if it's cutting it off. Nope, it's just not showing it. View. Auto frame, show results. That's not really showing anything. Nope. I don't know why it's not showing the values on the side here, but about here, actually, that and that. Something has gone awry. Let me check this real quick. Clip time, no. Auto frame, no. Let's delete that. I don't know what that is. So that's right. But for some reason, the Y, the 1 value is showing up here. 0.91. It's very weird. It's not that. That. I don't know. Something's clicked somewhere and I didn't click it. All right. Well, anyway, let me just verify that's 1. Yes, okay. It's weird. This is 1. That's 1 also. All right, give me 1 minute to figure out why this is not doing the right thing. Show upstream, no. Keys, curves. Flip time, auto frame. There we go, absolute view. Okay, so somehow I switched this to normalized view. Probably I hit 3 at some point, and I meant to leave it as absolute. That's better. All right, so this line right here is 1. So you'll see that's where they come together. So what part of my bouncing ball animation are they going to be at 1? What was that? Like right here? Right there it's 1, right? So scale X, Y, and Z are all 1. So that means it's perfectly round. So right there it's perfectly round. Right there it's perfectly round. So anytime it's perfectly round, they're going to be hitting right here at 1, 1, 1. Okay? So those are fine. This one is where it's the Y is going up. The Y is going up meaning it's stretching out. When this stretches out, this is going to squish in, which is that one. So what I'm going to do is make sure I'm in the move tool. And I'm just going to move these so that they feel like they're about the same distance from this point. Okay, so there's my 1. So if I move this to 1.5, and then I move this to, I don't want to do 0.5, it's going to be too much of a drastic change. I'm going to do like 0.7, I think that's good. Then I'm going to take my next Y, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't go as high as this one. Okay, just like our bouncing, it doesn't bounce as high each time. It's not going to squash and stretch as much each time. So if I just take this next one and move this lower than that one, then take the next one and move it lower than that one, then take the next one and move it lower than that one. That one's already lower. This one's a lot higher. Okay, now do the same thing on this side. This one is at 0.7, and this is the blue, so that's lower. I can raise this up a little bit more. Oops. Lower that one some, lower this one some. And all I'm doing is just bringing those closer to that center line. You can't cross it because that center line is 1, meaning that it's going to basically, like, as it stretches out, it's going to get fatter too for some reason. It wouldn't do that. Okay, so we should see it like this. It should be nice and big, and then gradually it gets thinner and thinner and thinner. Right? And that's what we see. It's really stretchy and really squashy, and then the next one it's less, and then the next one it's less, and then the next one it's less, and so on. Okay? So now we'll wind it, we'll hit play. A lot of stretch, less stretch, and you'll see right here at the end, you barely see any at all, and it shouldn't have a whole lot of stretch right at the end. And you'll also notice that the animation overall looks a lot more fluid now that we've adjusted those properties. Everything works together, so if one attribute is off, it can throw the entire thing off. So that's why you want to focus on just one area at a time. If you try to do them all, you're not going to be able to diagnose where the problem is. It's a little bit fast right here. That feels a little bit too quick. I'm just going to dope sheet it. Let's see. So between these keyframes here and these keyframes there needs to be a little bit more room, just a little bit more room. All right, now that feels a little bit fast here. So you'll see I'm adjusting these as a cluster. All right, that feels better. I think this end one I can probably give a little bit more. There we go, that feels better. Okay, good. All right, so what's the last thing that I need to fix on here? Oops.
How it goes through the floor.
Yes. Okay, so this is where we're building this in stages. We started off with just those translate Y, up, down, making sure that works. Once that was good, we moved on to the translate X, then we moved on to rotation, and now we're doing squash and stretch. We want to do the major stuff first, then work on all the details and further and further and further. So now that we're at this stage of getting this to work correctly, I want to focus in on each one of these spots. So here, I'm really going to zoom in here and just like set this up what I want it to look like. So I'm going to move this down, set a keyframe there, go to the next keyframe, move this up, set a keyframe there, go to the next keyframe, maybe I'll adjust this position a little bit over. Okay, and now we get to this point and we're doing the same thing. We get to this spot, this needs to come down. I think it should probably be rotated maybe a little bit back this way. So set those two keyframes, go up to the next one, set this down, maybe roll it a little bit forward. Anything that's in pink, I just set keyframes on, or I just moved, so. All right, that might look weird, this little rock. I may have rocked it a little bit too much. Let's go back a little bit. There we go, and now it's launched. Then we go to the other side, and I'm just hitting F just to jump over there. There's where it's supposed to hit the ground. A little bit. All right, that's good. And then the same thing here. So you can see I'm just kind of tweaking these as I go. If I tried to do this all at once, it would be very, very difficult. I didn't set a keyframe on that, so let's just set a keyframe there. And then here. And give it a little bit of roll backwards. There we go. And that should actually be good there. Okay, so there's that. All right. So now, that feels like a nice animation. It's not perfect. I can still go back there and tweak some stuff. But for what we're doing and the time that we have for this, it's really good. Okay? Cool. So I'm going to save this. Once I have this part set up, I can focus in on lighting. I can focus in on materials. I'm not going to go over that today. I'll go over that on Wednesday so you can see it. I'd also focus in on cameras. How do I want to tell the story about this ball bouncing? Do I want to be here seeing the ball bouncing? Or do I want to be, have several cameras set up and have maybe the ball like right, come on, Maya, like that. This might be a cool shot. Oops, we don't want to cut it off, so let's frame this a little better. cut off all the way. Now where that one was. Okay, I could even use this for just like that bounce, just like coming in like, or I want to keep it from the side view. And then just kind of follow it as it's moving. Okay, so that's stuff to consider as you're doing your animation so that you can see this is what I want to do. Now I'm going to throw one more thing out there and then let you work. Now this is straightforward ball bounce, squishing and squashing and all that. I haven't used anything outside the box of a sphere and this platform, which, you know, is just a placeholder. If I were to make, let's say, a NURB sphere, I'll make it the same size, or roughly the same size, 6 here and 3 there. Nope. 6 there. I'm going to use a different menu. So I'm going to go to Deform. I'm going to go to Nonlinear. And inside this menu, I have a couple things I can play with. One of them is Squash. Okay, so this tool allows me to go to Squash here, go to Factor, and use my middle mouse to actually squash and stretch the ball in one slider. Okay, now the reason I would want to use something like this is, let's say that my ball was rotated at some funky angle. With this squash manipulator, this still works. Okay, so as long as that's there, I can move the ball and rotate it, and that squashing will still affect it. For instance, I can even go like this, and then still rotate this, and it still stays squashed. Okay, so that might be like an effect that you would want for something. Now, I can also take this, let me undo it to get back around, and there. And I'm going to go to Deform, Nonlinear, and I'm going to go to Bend. Okay, so someone asked last time, what if I wanted it to have a little bit more character, maybe bend around and do whatever. So I'm going to go to the Bend, I'm going to go to Curvature, and I'm going to go to Wireframe so we can see this, so I hit 4. And if I use the middle mouse on Curvature, I can actually get this to bend. Now here it looks stupid, but let me take this to the bottom of here. Okay, there's a middle point. I'm going to scale this up, and then now I'm going to use Curvature, and now I can get this to bend a little bit more. Now if I pair that with this squash, so he stretches out like this, and I'll actually move the squash handle down here and stretch that out, and then do this. You see how it squashes from just that one point. Then I can grab the bend handle, go to Curvature, and now I can do this. And if I rotate that around, oops, if I grab the right handle and rotate that around, you'll see that he can then also like look around. Okay, this is one of the websites we're going to use eventually. It used to be High-End 3D, then it was Creative Crash, and now for some reason it's back to High-End 3D. Sphere rig, ultimate ball for Maya. So this is a rigged ball that could be used to animate. So this is all of this stuff created with some controllers so it's easier to move around. So if I click on these, I can see all the different types of setups that they have here where you're able to actually go through and choose what kind of ball you want, and it automatically will color it that way. And it has all the controls for doing the same kind of stuff. Sometimes we'll, okay, so I just want to show that just so you can see it. And if this is what you would be using for doing your, let's say, squashing and stretching, which if you want to try it, go ahead. If you want to try the bending, go ahead. All of these things, all 3 of these things would get grouped together. So I hit Control G, and I'd be animating this group moving forward so that everything goes with it. If I just grab the sphere and move it, that happens. If I just grab the handle, that happens. Okay? If I try to grab all 3 and move it like this, that seems to work, but every time I set a key, I'm going to be setting a key for each one of those items. So make it into a group, animate the group moving, and then you can play with the other stuff. If you want to play it safe, stick with the straight ball and then worry about the rest of the scene after. Cool. Questions on that yet? Next class, yep. No? All right.